James 4, verse 8, James said, "Come near to God, and God will come near to you." So that sounds pretty simple and straightforward, doesn't it? If you have a spiritual sickness, if you have an injury, God will heal you if you just approach Him. So that being the case, we could just dispense with the rest of this conversation, right? Because that's the answer. But unfortunately, it's not that easy because a lot of us have a hard time approaching God as a healer for our injuries. Why is that? Well, it kind of makes sense that we would, because not everybody, but a lot of us, and I'm going to include myself in this, have a hard time going to the doctor in general, right? When you know you're sick, you know you need some help, a lot of people still drag their feet. They don't want to go see that doctor for various different reasons. It might be that you're afraid of the medicine he might have for you. Maybe you don't like the idea of possibly getting that needle, even if it's delivering something that you need, so you hold back. There's going to be something painful. Or maybe you think when you go see the doctor, he may tell you something you don't want to hear. Maybe some bad news, but it may also be that you haven't been taking care of yourself the way you're supposed to be. Maybe there's some lifestyle changes that you know he's going to tell you need to make, and you're not quite ready to hear that or do it, so we kind of hold back a little bit. And with all those things, you're afraid. Afraid to go to the doctor, afraid of what you might hear, afraid of what you might say, what you might have to do. Now, what about approaching God? In some ways, approaching God as a healer, our reticence to do that is kind of similar, for similar reasons to what I just said about going to the doctor. Maybe we're afraid of changes that we may have to make, afraid of what we'll be told. But there's also a couple of other reasons that people tend to be afraid to approach God for healing that go beyond anything that you would usually worry about with an actual physical doctor. Some people feel that they are undeserving of God's help. They are too undeserving. So they don't go to Him because they think, well, I'm not worth it. I don't deserve it. He's not going to help me anyway. And sometimes they say, there are so many other people that need help more than I do. Why should I take up God's time? As if an infinite God had time for you to take up. People who say that, often what they really mean is there are other people who deserve to be helped more than I do. And that can hold us back sometimes. Another thing that can hold us back from going to God, that's closely related to that one sometimes, is feeling hopeless. I just don't want to go to God to heal my physical, or my spiritual injuries, physical ones too, because it's not going to happen anyway. It's hopeless, right? Those two things in particular can hold us back. So to delve a little more deeply into those three things, the fear of the doctor, that's all self-explanatory. But about the feeling undeserving, that's something that a lot of us wrestle with, I think. Probably more of us than we realize. There may be people, sitting near us that have similar feelings of worthlessness, maybe, that we have and we kind of keep quiet about. Sometimes that's because we are human and we all make mistakes. Sometimes our mistakes are very, very big mistakes. I'm a person who has made some very, very big mistakes, so I'm familiar with that. But sometimes it goes beyond the mistakes we may have made, and it's something that's intrinsic in us, that's a result of our experiences, our past experiences, maybe the way that we were raised, or things that happened to us in the past, things perhaps that people have done to us that made us feel worthless, things that people have said to us that have sort of inculcated in us this feeling that we are undeserving and we are worthless. It's sort of like taking a sapling and tying it into a knot and then expecting it to grow straight. It's not going to happen unless something is done. So that is a big problem, and it can make it seem impossible to believe God would even want to heal us or help us in any way, as undeserving as we are. Now, if we step back and try to look at the whole situation objectively, which is very hard to do when you're grappling with this sort of thing, we can ask the question, well, do these other people, are they really more deserving than me? Am I less deserving than they are of God's grace? Who deserves God's grace? Well, nobody does. If you look at it in the sense of perfectly meeting up with God's expectations of us, or even our expectations of ourselves, we all stumble and fall every day, and grace is not something we can earn anyhow. That being the case, some people can't earn it more than others, right? And the fact that it is God's gift through Jesus Christ to everybody that wants to take it implies that, A, looking at it from a legalistic standpoint, really we're all unworthy to a certain degree. And being all unworthy makes us all equally worthy. No one is more unworthy than others or more worthy than others. Now, there is a scripture in the Bible, Matthew 5:48, that frustrates some people who have read it and not continued reading far enough, where Jesus said, you must be perfect as the Father is perfect. That's pretty high standard, right? And it's impossible to meet. But if you continue reading the next clause, really, in that sentence, Jesus says, for God makes it rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So let's go back and examine that for a moment. You have to be perfect like God. God makes it rain on the righteous, and God makes it rain on the unrighteous. That is not saying you have to be absolutely perfect and devoid of mistakes. It's saying your love should be like God's love, which is applied perfectly to everybody. So in that sense, your love can be perfect. And since God's love is perfect, he is not going to love you any less or make it rain on you any less if you're standing outside than whoever is standing next to you. Now, this sort of thing, like I said, looking at it objectively, you can come to these conclusions, but it's hard to be objective when you're dealing with these deep feelings that you have that have been really, like I said, inculcated into you, built into you, really. And I personally, I'm going to tell you a little story, and I may get a little teary on this one because that's how I roll. But a couple of years ago, something happened to me that was like a big epiphany that brought something home to me in a way that it had never been brought home before. And it had to do with my child, my oldest, who had just done something that I thought was extraordinarily brave, that showed just extraordinary courage and made me extremely proud. And I was thinking about how proud I was of this brave, brave thing. And did it occur to me while I was thinking about this, did I think back to that little girl I used to have who, when she was 5 years old, decided it would be fun to swing from the ceiling fan in my room and broke off the fan blade and hit it and then lied when I asked about it? I didn't think about that. You know, that little 5-year-old girl was absolutely terrified of me. Did I think about that later? No, I didn't. Did I think about all the times that she made bad grades or disappointed me in any way? None of that, even for an instant, entered my mind. All I felt was this immense love and joy and pride, particularly in knowing that this young person had taken the things that I had tried to teach them and internalize